John Lawrenson reporting. Well, you may remember that this week began with huge demonstrations in Germany by the PEGIDA group, which campaigns against what it claims is the Islamization of Europe. We're joined from Berlin by Dr. Riam Spielhaus of the Erlangen Centre for Islam and Law in Europe. Nabila Ramdani, a French journalist and commentator, is with me in the studio. And Dr. Edward Kessler, director of the Wolf Institute in Cambridge, is on the line from Cambridge. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nabila Ramdani, it's pretty clear when people come onto the streets in the way they've been doing this weekend what they're demonstrating against. But what about what they're coming out for? When people say Je suis Charlie, what do they mean?
Well, absolutely, that's a very good question. That's a very good question, Edward. I think it can mean a lot of things. I think we've seen a lot of people coming who are very prompt to show their support and indeed their sympathy, and indeed for the victims. And that, Je suis Charlie can in that sense mean I show my sympathy towards the victims of those horrific crimes. And but we've also seen how, the atrocity has brought to the fore the question of freedom of speech in France. And that the catchy slogan, if you like, has also come to mean, or solidarity for that value, and the right to defend it.
And is there any difference between people who say that and people who say Je suis Ahmed after the policeman who was killed? Because he too is a very powerful symbol, isn't he? He was clearly a very integrated Muslim, actually defending the state, doing his duty, who paid with his life.
Yes, indeed. And I think, I can't see the difference between Je suis Charlie and indeed Je suis Ahmed. I think perhaps the aim is to show that, it's a nation which is in absolute shock and that is overwhelmed by sadness and anger. And the idea is to bring people together of different faiths.
Edward Kessler, one story which has emerged just overnight, really, which is very moving and I suspect you will find encouraging, is that of the Muslim shop assistant in the kosher supermarket that was at the centre of all this, or one of the centres of all this, who actually looked after a group of presumably Jewish customers by hiding them in the coal store in the basement.
Yes, it's a remarkable story, and I think we need those models of excellence. So Lastany Bethely took Jewish customers, hid them in the fridge, more or less, including a baby, and they survived as a result of his action. And he's not the only one. There are examples of courage as a result of the sort of humanism, if you like, that these people are exhibiting. So yes, we need those models, but bear in mind that they were necessary in the face of such terrible action.
And we should say, shouldn't we, that Jews died because, well, for no other reason than that they were Jews, which...
That's right. And of course, the third hashtag is Je suis juif. And I think, as Riam was saying, it's about solidarity with the victim. There are many of us who have tweeted, I'm a Jew. I've tweeted Je suis Ahmed, as well as Je suis Charlie. And it is a sign of solidarity with all of those who have been victims of this terrible attack.
Dr. Spielhaus, I suspect we might have been talking to you anyway this week because of the demonstrations that there have been in Germany, but obviously this makes the whole question that bit more urgent. What impact is it having there, and what impact is it having on the way people think about the PEGIDA movement?
So I think in the first minutes and hours, everybody was shocked also in Germany. And what then happened is that we had to rethink, because I think after PEGIDA has been forming itself in late October and November, December, and then in December they had about 18,000 people on the street in Dresden for their Monday demonstrations every week. And people were actually shocked, and people were, this year they were getting together, and we had the first counter demonstrations last Monday. But this event, in a way, it seems, it feeds into the narrative of the PEGIDA demonstrators, calling for, there is this Islamization of Europe, and Islam is dangerous, and it makes it in the first second you really think it makes it really difficult for those who argue against that. And I think this is why what we've just been talking about, the Muslims that stood up for France, that stood up for the caricaturist or for the shoppers in the supermarket. They are so important. They are really a symbol for that, because it shows that it's not a divide between Muslim or non-Muslim. It's the terrorists against all of us.
Well, just let's take a step back and perhaps ask one of the questions that we would have been asking had this not happened of you. PEGIDA seems to have erupted in a way that I suspect has taken many people outside Germany by surprise. Where has it come from?
And inside as well. Everybody's been surprised, I think. There is a so researchers are wondering about that, but there have been several surveys that have been showing that around 20% of the population in Germany are worried about where the country is going and about the diversity, and actually have a problem with Germany being a pluralist country. And so it seems that these people have been left a little bit out of the debates, and that is why also researchers are now calling for us to really negotiate the identity of the country and really negotiate and communicate how we are going to live together
well, we'll
peacefully.
Talk a bit more about that in a moment, but let me come back to you, Nabila, on this question of history and how these difficulties arise. And France has a particular history, doesn't it, both in terms of the memories of the very brutal civil war in Algeria, and also the whole question of secularism and its way it sometimes conflicts with religious sensibilities. Do you think that there is a broader European narrative, if you like, that we can talk about here, that there's something more general going on in Europe?
Well, I think for a start, the notion of secularism in France has been often manipulated, not least of all by politicians, for the notion to mean the stifling of the expression of faith. It's the exact opposite. It actually allows the expression of faith in the public domain. Unfortunately, it has come to mean the opposite, and that's why we're seeing tensions, meaning that it's a secular country and therefore you shouldn't express your faith in public. That's entirely wrong. But I think, beyond that, we are likely to see not just fringe parties, but mainstream political parties on the far right exploit that kind of spectacular, if I may put it that way. Let's not forget that the National Front in France is not a fringe party. It's very much a mainstream party that has already started to capitalize on this tragedy. We've heard how Marine Le Pen was prompt to say that she wants to reinstate the death penalty in the wake of all this. It's quite worrying, and to see, similar trends across Europe. And my fear is that we are yet going to see another narrative emerge where the legacy of Muslims in Europe will be discarded.
Edward Kessler, Dr. Spiel has mentioned the need to confront new ways of getting communities to live together. That's something which Jews in this country certainly have great experience of. Do you think that the Jewish lesson of what it means to integrate has a part to play here?
Well, I do think so. I mean, next year the Jewish community will be celebrating its 360th anniversary of return in the time of Cromwell, and it is
quite a long time, isn't it?
It's quite a long time,
and these problems are rather more recent.
Well, that's a fair point. But the example that one can give is that of integration. Now, one of the things looking at European arena is there's developed over many centuries a European Judaism, not a North American, not an Israel, but a European Judaism. And I think there are signs of they're also developing a European Islam. This is something that Tariq Ramadan has written about. That is an Islam that is suitable and integrated into France, into Germany, into the UK. And the Muslim communities are very diverse in those three countries. So that there are lessons. And to me, it doesn't matter whether the model is laïcité, secularism, or the British model of multiculturalism. Essentially, we've got to work out how do we handle disagreement and how do we live together. And it's not rocket science. In the end, it's about human relations. It's not religious issues. It is social, economic issues.
Dr. Spielhaus, what do you make of that idea of a European Islam? Because from what you say, that doesn't sound as if it's happening in Germany, or certainly people don't think it is.
I think Yes, I think some people, I mean, those who go on the streets arguing that there is an Islamization of Europe happening, they would not like the idea even of a European Islam. That's exactly the problem. I think the problem also is that this is happening. I mean, in Germany, we now have 5 centers of Islamic theology in the country funded by the government. And so a lot of things are happening. There is a professionalization of the Muslim youth going on and so on. So I mean, a lot of things are happening, but towards the direction of, let me say, an integrated Islam. An Islam that belongs to Europe and to Germany, for instance. But this is, I think, not the problem that we are tackling right now, because that is actually the issue of whether Islam or Muslims do belong to Germany or to Europe. That's the question that is put back on the tablet.
But you're saying that actually, quite quietly, a process of constructing a perfectly integrated Islam is going ahead. It's just people are misreading it.
Yes, I think so. And people are not liking the idea that actually, that a mosque is being built. A mosque being built means that people are going to stay. And that's exactly the conflict that goes along with it. That a lot of people, or some people, around 20%, and that's the case in the Netherlands and Sweden and Denmark. We have the same kind of number of amount of the population who is in disagreement with such a development. They just can't, they just can't accept that. And I think this is really where we need to discuss, what does religious freedom mean? Does it actually also, by definition, includes other religions like Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism? And people really need to face that this is actually really happening.
Nabila Ramdani, you wanted to come in there, yes?
Yes, I think also France is now faced with a question it needs to sort out. An inconsistency that we have seen emerge at the heart of this tragedy is that on the one hand you've got mechanisms in France where the state intervenes to curb the liberties of certain groups, including Muslim groups, in legislating in the way they should follow their faith, the way they should dress, the way they should eat.
You mean things like the ban on the full veil?
Burqa, restrictions on halal meat or places of worship, for example, while at the same time allowing the expression of prejudice and hatred through channels like Charlie Hebdo. This is not unacceptable and it cannot be reconciled.
And by the sound of it, you think that division is going to rub more after the events of this week?
Very much so.
That must be a worrying thing to hear in Germany.
Yes, we all do fear backlashes. I mean, in August 2014, there was a mosque burning in Berlin, and a lot of people now fear that this might continue.
On that rather somber thought, we're going to have to leave it because we've run out of time, but thank you all very much indeed for joining us this morning. You can hear some more on those issues, which will be debated further in tomorrow's edition of Beyond Belief at 4:30 here on Radio 4. William Crawley will be in the chair next week. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.